You are tuned in to The Road Home, powered by the Truckers Service Association. On this show, I sit down with Rebecca Brewster, President and Chief Operating Officer of ATRI, to discuss issues facing the trucking industry. And I welcome back Nevein Jeff to talk about travel tips and a great destination for family or friends to the Caribbean. Do us a favor and subscribe to the podcast. And if you like what we're doing, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts. And now to the show. On this segment of The Road Home, I'm pleased to be joined by the President and Chief Operating Officer of the American Transportation Research Institute, or better known as ATRI, Rebecca Brewster. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on today, John.
Well, this is fantastic. We've had a chance to visit. We've both been in the industry a long time, 25 plus years for both of us. And it's good to connect with you here on the show. Now, ATRI's annual top industry issues survey identified the driver shortage as the number one industry concern for the fourth year in a row. Does ATRI's research point to any potential solutions to this perennial issue?
Well, we've done a lot of work in this area, not necessarily just quantifying the shortage, but really looking at what's behind it and, as you suggest, what could be done about it. And I think first and foremost, I would point to the top industry issues survey itself, because not only is there value in the overall ranking of the issues, but I think the real meat of that analysis is towards the back, where we break out responses by motor carriers and professional drivers. And on the motor carrier side, the driver shortage and driver retention are their top two issues. And I always tell audiences, if your number one and number two concerns are finding and keeping the best professional drivers, then I strongly encourage you to understand the issues on the driver side of the equation. And in our list this year, the top three for drivers were truck parking, driver compensation, and detention. And all three of those are things that motor carriers can work to affect to improve the situation for their drivers.
Rebecca, let's take a step back for just a moment, because a lot of our listeners are professional drivers, independent contractors, men and women, obviously transportation executives. But you've been at ATRI for 27 years. Without going into a ton of detail, if you could just kind of share what the main mission is there at ATRI.
Absolutely. We are the trucking industry's not-for-profit research organization, and we have one mission. And that is to do the research to improve the trucking industry's safety and productivity. And one of the hallmarks of ATRI, John, is that all of our research is available free of charge. And so as you and I talk today through some of our studies, I would encourage your listeners, if they have an interest in seeing that study, to go to our website. It's at truckingresearch.org. It's pretty easy to find us. It's what we do. And we have all of our research grouped by topic areas. And so everything from hours of service rules to environmental impacts to economic analyses to driver safety. You can find all of our research categorized under those, we call them research hot topics, and you can download any of those studies. And again, we put our research out there for free of charge for anyone to access, because we want it to be used to fulfill our mission, which is to improve the industry's safety and productivity.
And Rebecca, we'll put in the show notes. It's like a hyperlink. We can put links to any and all of your websites and links back to the research. So that's a great point. And I applaud all y'all do. I've had the opportunity to be in some of your live audiences at some of the conferences, and just recently I was on a webinar that you were a part of. So I applaud everything that you and your team are doing to make the industry better. Now, picking up on that survey question you answered a moment ago, in that same survey, driver compensation was the number two overall industry concern you mentioned. Many would argue that there's not a shortage of drivers, but a shortage of pay. Essentially, if we compensate the drivers enough, you'll have all the drivers you need, is kind of what people are thinking, yet ATRI's survey found them ranked as two separate issues. What is driving the high ranking for these two issues?
Well, they really are two sides of one coin. And I agree that if you got driver compensation to a certain level, you would have no shortage of drivers. But I also recognize the realities of what getting driver compensation to that level would mean for the entire supply chain and for the price of all the goods that we all count on those professional men and women to deliver. And so part of what's driving the high ranking for those two issues is the broad representation of both drivers and motor carriers and other industry stakeholders in this survey. We've been doing this survey since 2005, and this year was our highest participation at over 3,100 participants, and over a third of those were professional drivers. And so they ranked several of their key issues as their number one issue. Both truck parking and driver compensation were the driver's top two issues, truck parking being number one and compensation number two. And so when you have, based on our methodology, when you have a large number of votes, number one votes for an issue, it's going to be high up in the overall ranking. So that's where driver compensation is. But John, it wasn't just drivers who ranked driver compensation as a top issue. We had other industry stakeholders and motor carriers who ranked it as a top issue. And I think particularly this year, because of the pandemic, we saw motor carriers be concerned about driver compensation because in response to the shortage over the past several years, fleets have been increasing driver pay. And that's good. And we all want drivers to be paid what they should be paid. But then you have a situation, an unexpected situation that results in an economic downturn for certain segments of the industry. And suddenly compensation becomes a problem if your business dries up. And we know for certain segments of the industry, particularly early on in March and April, that was the case.
Well, Rebecca, one thing you mentioned that I'm curious about is, I'm sure a lot of our listeners, you mentioned truck parking. I know it seemed like a few years ago there was a big movement, third parties building extra truck parking. Can you touch on the truck parking issue just briefly?
Absolutely. And we've seen truck parking in the top industry issues survey for a number of years. I believe 2010 or 2012 might have been the first year it showed up in the top 10. And on the research side of things, John, we've seen it as a big issue. Our research advisory committee, the group that identifies what research we should be working on, has routinely selected studies focused on addressing this issue of truck parking. And even as a result of this annual survey, we've seen a number of state Department of Transportation's put an emphasis on and initiate state-level truck parking studies. ATRI's been involved in a number of them. To really identify where the shortages are, and more importantly, what can we do about those shortages? So we can't, unfortunately, build our way out of this particular problem. Although certainly, at the end of the day, what we need is just more pavement for trucks to park on. But there are other solutions, among them real-time information systems that provide drivers information about available parking so they don't have to get off at an exit and look around and wonder, is there available parking?
You know, that's a great point. I noticed in some of the parking structures now, like at airports, I'm sure you've seen them, Rebecca, they have like a green light, red light. So you know, and as you drive in, you say, hey, there's 29 available spots on level A, there's 300 on level B and 0 on level C. So similar type technology, right?
Absolutely. So I'm driving up Interstate I-75 here outside of Atlanta, and I want to know at the upcoming exit if there's available parking. If there's a real-time information sign on the interstate about a mile out that can give me that information, then I know there are 6 spaces or 20 spaces there, and so can make that decision whether I pull off and go grab one of those spaces or if I keep going.
ATRI's new operational cost of trucking report actually showed that the driver wage and benefit cost per mile went down in 2019 from the previous report. How does that align with the top industry issues results?
Well, it was surprising to us until we really started to get into the data. And so for a little background for your listeners on what we call in-house the ops cost report, that's an annual research activity we've done since 2008 where we collect very detailed financial data from hundreds of motor carriers. We aggregate it, we analyze it, and we come up with an average cost per mile to operate a truck. And we have vehicle-based cost and we have driver-based cost as part of that. And so driver wage cost per mile and driver benefit cost per mile are part of that equation. And in the most recent report, which we released in November, it captured 2019 data, and from the previous year's report, we did see the average driver wage and benefit costs go down. But what we did see on the flip side is we saw overall increases in the types of other compensation that fleets are providing to drivers, specifically starting bonuses, retention bonuses, and safety bonuses, safety performance bonuses. And particularly looking at the retention bonuses, we saw an 80% increase, actually an 82% increase over the previous year in the average amount paid to a driver for a retention bonus. And so fleets, at least the fleets in our data collection, seem to be shifting more towards other types of compensation for drivers. They recognize they've got to keep drivers, and they're looking for other ways to do so.
Well, Rebecca, hey, back up on the truck parking issue, man, I know it's important to everybody. It ranked third overall this year on the driver list of concerns. It was number one, yet it doesn't show up on the motor carrier top 10. Can you explain that disconnect and what can be done to more closely align the top concerns of both drivers and motor carriers?
Well, certainly I understand why it is so high on the drivers list, because drivers experience that lack of available parking every single day. And it's their frustration and their pain point. But the fact of the matter is, and I'll point back to the statement I made earlier, if I'm a motor carrier and I care about finding and keeping good drivers, then I better care about what drivers care about. And so, to me, it's frustrating that we don't see truck parking higher on the motor carrier list, because it is impacting the most valuable part of our workforce each and every single day. And, I have had motor carriers say to me, well, I can't build parking spaces myself. True, that's not your business. But here's some things you can do as a motor carrier to start to help that situation. Work with your state DOT to make sure that they don't close rest areas like we saw happen during the pandemic. Work with your local zoning group to make sure that if there is a private rest area or truck stop that wants to come in, that they don't face a bunch of hurdles. And then probably the easiest one, work with your customers so that when they hold your drivers up unnecessarily, they provide a safe haven for your drivers.
And that's great insight, Rebecca. Hey, moving along, CSA ranked fourth overall this year, which seems high given that we've been operating with CSA in place for over a decade now. What's behind that concern?
That one surprised me too, John, honestly, and this is one analysis that I do myself, the top industry issues. So I double, triple checked my math in the spreadsheet just to make sure I was calculating it right. But right, it came up to number 4 overall, and it surprised me so much that I reached out to a number of the people, motor carriers primarily, who had ranked CSA as their number one concern to really understand what was driving that concern. And the issues they recited to me are as numerous as, quite frankly, the body of work we've done in CSA, looking at things like your peer group ranking. And carriers feel they're not in the appropriate peer group and being compared to other fleets like their size. Or they have issues with data that's in their CSA scores that isn't theirs. So erroneous data, so bad data in, bad data out, and it's impacting their scores. Another big issue for carriers is, while FMCSA has instituted a crash preventability determination program, fleets described for me some of the frustrations they've had in getting some of those crashes removed from their crash basic score through the data queue system. And so the issues are still varied, and they tell me that given this increase in ranking, CSA had dropped down to number 8 in the previous year, back up to number 4, that there are still a number of things that need to be resolved around CSA.
Wow. And you were on top of things there, Rebecca. I'm impressed.
Well, thank you.
Hey, next up, transportation infrastructure congestion. It's on the motor carrier list, but dropped out of the top 10 overall this year. Has the industry just given up hope that anything will be done to address our nation's infrastructure? And I know it's a big issue in Washington as well.
It is a big issue in Washington, but unfortunately we have not seen a real commitment at the federal level to really putting the money where it needs to be to address our nation's infrastructure issues. It's sort of a kick the can approach with continuing resolutions to just keep the funding at its current level. Now, states have stepped in to fill that void where they have had to, and we've seen states raise their fuel tax. We've seen other states take an approach to toll roads, and I think of the Rhode Island case where they're tolling only trucks, and that's certainly not an efficient way to collect transportation revenue. So I do think there's some battle fatigue, if you will, on the part of the industry. You know, we've said this is an issue, we've said it's an issue, we've said it's an issue, and it's not getting resolved. But I also think, John, that's a symptom of this year with the pandemic, because as you know, early on, we saw congestion, and we monitored this with our GPS data set. We saw congestion at some of the worst bottlenecks almost disappear because the four-wheelers were all staying at home. And so the trucking industry really had the nation's infrastructure to itself for a while.
Yeah, I've seen some heat maps where it shows, red is congestion, and it's been amazing. It's starting to come back now as people are getting out, Rebecca, but it was weird to see around, major metro areas like Atlanta, where you are, Denver, Dallas, Houston. The red just kind of went away there for a couple months.
It did. I mean, for instance, your listeners, if they drive around Atlanta, know the location Spaghetti Junction. It's where 285, our perimeter here in Atlanta, intersects with 85. And when we looked at the GPS data in March of this year, that location typically in the afternoon rush hour has average truck speeds of about 14 or 15 miles per hour. During the third week in March of this year, average truck speeds were 55 miles per hour, which is what it's posted at. Now, I can tell you, I can look out my window and see I-285 from my office here, and traffic congestion is back in Atlanta.
Now, most drivers get paid by the mile, so they've had, an unplanned wage increase during the pandemic, it sounds like.
Well, certainly the supply chain and as a result, driver pay has been impacted because the supply chain's been operating a lot more efficiently. However, it's not all that it seems because, John, we did some survey work with drivers during the first part of the pandemic. And one of the things we asked about was, were they experiencing any improvements or changes in detention? And we had about a third of the respondents to that survey say that detention had actually gotten worse during the pandemic. So the roads might have been open, four-wheelers were staying at home, but when you get to where you're supposed to pick up or deliver, it's not all perfect yet.
You're bringing it back down to, you're normalizing it for the compensation piece. I appreciate that. Rebecca, one thing we've had discussions on several segments of the Road Home podcast is driver health and wellness. We both talked, if it wasn't for the professional driver, you nor I would be sitting in our chairs right now. So driver health and wellness is another issue that shows up on the driver's list of concerns at number 8, but yet it's not on the motor carrier list or in the overall top 10. I do know several carriers have put in health and wellness programs, have little fitness areas, workout areas at their terminals. But it seems like this year, especially with the pandemic, that driver's health should be near the top of everyone's ranking. Is there a relationship between driver health and wellness and the driver shortage?
Well, I think particularly this year, John, when we know that the driver population, many in the driver population have a number of the comorbidities that were identified as putting you at greater risk for COVID, those overweight and diabetes and heart issues and other things that would put you at increased risk. And so I believe that our workforce was impacted in terms of folks who said, you know what, I just can't put myself in that much of a risky situation. I'm going to park the truck. I'm going to go find something else to do where I feel more safe. Now that we're seeing the vaccines start to roll out, hopefully that will mitigate some of those concerns, and certainly the push by the industry to get professional drivers among the first to get that vaccine, considering their essential role is critical. But I do think that we need to have a better focus and a more urgent focus on the health and wellness of the men and women who drive professionally, because they are our greatest asset in this industry. And there are simple solutions. Ultimately, it's up to all of us to take care of our own personal health, but there are some simple solutions. Even doing things like providing blood pressure cuffs in your driver lounge so your drivers can keep in tabs on their own blood pressure when they come in. Providing healthy snacks in your break room so that people can have access to things other than, cookies and chips. Just simple things go a long way to help drivers stay healthy.
What I found in my own journey, Rebecca, is we all have the knowledge of what we need to do. It's just a matter of implementing and using those resources to do the right thing. Sometimes chips, cookies are easier, might be cheaper than organic source produce or fruit. So that's a challenge. And I do want to throw down a challenge to everybody tuning in as we roll into the new year. This will be aired shortly after the 2021 in January. Let's all get healthier. What do you say, Rebecca?
I have used the pandemic and not being on the road traveling. I've taken off about 40 pounds this year, and I'm very proud of that. And I have convinced, and I've done it because I've been walking. And I have just convinced myself that even when I get back on the road and start going out to tell the ATRI story around this country, I have got to make time to incorporate some steps into my day every day. And it wasn't easy at first, and my husband grumbled this morning because it was 21 degrees when we woke up, but I said, we're going to go get our walk in because we've got to do it.
Well, I can tell we have a video feed going right now. You have more energy, you have more enthusiasm. There's a correlation with healthy lifestyle and productivity at work or driving.
Absolutely. And I don't sit driving a truck all day, but I sit at a desk all day when I'm not out on the road. And so I appreciate the challenges, that drivers face out on the road. And the lack of good eating options. And I get that too. And you do have to make a personal decision, but I can now personally testify to how much better I feel and how much more energy I do have and how committed I am to personally make sure I don't go back up in the scale.
Now, Rebecca, last question. I had Dan Cook, an insurance expert, on recently to discuss nuclear verdicts. And earlier this year, ATRI released a study looking at the impact of nuclear verdicts, and that research pointed to the impact of those large verdicts on the rising cost of insurance premiums. Question, are those impacts uniform across the industry, or are there sectors of the industry where they are being felt more dramatically?
Well, certainly if you are the target of one of those nuclear verdicts, you're feeling the pain a lot more so. You and your insurance carrier are feeling the pain a lot more so than those who are not. But ultimately what we found in our research, John, is that these nuclear verdicts, these 10 million plus verdicts against trucking companies, are raising the cost of insurance for everybody. And we know that those rapidly increasing insurance premiums are causing some fleets to shut down. They simply cannot absorb it anymore. But what we have also found in our operational cost of trucking data is that smaller fleets are really feeling the pain of those increasing insurance premiums. The cost per mile, the insurance premium cost per mile for the smallest fleets in our data set is 3 times what it is for the larger fleets. And in a lot of instances, that's because larger fleets can take a larger deductible, they can do some self-insurance, other things that small fleets cannot avail themselves of. So it's particularly problematic at the smaller end of the continuum in terms of fleet size.
Well, Rebecca, in closing, any special message you'd like to share to the men and women drivers that are tuned in right now delivering somewhere in the United States or Canada?
Absolutely, John, and thanks for having me on today. I got my start in the industry in the mid-'80s working for a private fleet, and one of the first jobs that I had to do with them was to work with what we called our driver quality circle. And so every Saturday morning when drivers would come in for the week, we'd meet, we'd talk about issues, we'd work to resolve some problems, and it really gave me my first up-close look at how professional this industry is, but also how good these folks are, just salt of the earth men and women who are out there serving our nation. And I'm so gratified that, I'm sorry it took a pandemic to do this, but I'm so gratified with the attention, positive attention that the men and women who drive professionally have received this year, where finally America connected the dots between, oh my gosh, I want to buy 50 rolls of toilet paper. It takes a truck driver to make sure that my store shelves are stocked. And And again, now with the vaccine rolling out, renewed emphasis on how the trucking industry is so critical in that. So I just want to say thank you for what you do as a professional driver. I've known it for a long time. Those of us who work in the industry know how critical you are, but I'm so gratified to see the rest of the American public come to realize how important the industry is and how important you are as a professional driver.
Rebecca, well stated, and it was national news on every social media feed, all those trucks leaving, I believe it was Pfizer, the distribution centers, and just a real proud moment. I shared it on some of my social media just to be in our industry and salute the professional driver. Rebecca Brewster, President and COO of the ATRI organization. Thanks for joining me on the road home. Happy holiday season and be safe out there.
Thanks so much.
As we roll into the new year, many are optimistic about 2021 and starting to plan destination travel for themselves and their families. On this segment of The Road Home, I'm joined by Nevein Jeff, owner of the Concierge Travel Company. Welcome back to the show.
Woohoo! Yeah, I'm so ready for 2021. Can't wait. Thank you.
Yeah, we've been visiting for quite some time, and I can feel your enthusiasm and excitement for travel. You were just helping a client with some travel plans, I believe, to Europe or the Caribbean. That's some things we'll talk about. Speaking of that, Nevein, you specialize in travel destinations, not only in the Caribbean, but also to Europe. This has been this segment talking about a dream vacation and how to navigate travel with the health concerns that will still surround us well into 2021. And we were talking, my family just got back from a trip to Orlando. We hopped on an airplane. It went very well. We felt safe on the plane, the hotel, car rentals, restaurants, everywhere we went. And I think that's part of the concern that people have is, hey, what's it going to be like if I board that plane? And, they're concerned about their health and safety. Why don't we start there? Can you address kind of the health and safety concerns of travelers?
Absolutely. Well, we'll start with my experience. So, of course, everybody does not like wearing masks, but we wear them. And it's just the thought that you're going to be wearing it at the airport for a couple of hours, boarding the plane, get off the plane with a transit, back again. That was very intimidating, and you feel like, oh, I don't want to deal with that. However, it wasn't that bad, honestly. I just came back from Jamaica. It was a destination wedding, believe it or not. We were 10 couples. Every island in the Caribbean is different as far as regulation and rules of visiting that island. So for Jamaica, for example, it's always good, really good, to check with your travel agent before travel, especially these days. There's so many steps that you need to do before travel, but your travel agent can make it a piece of cake. No big deal. You take the COVID test, for example, for Jamaica, it's 9 days before you travel. You fill a health form on the website. You print it out. You get there. They do a health screening. It's really 10 minutes. Check the temperature. Make sure that you got approved with the health screening. They look at your negative COVID test. You have the mask on. Get in the car. Once you get to the resort, only the staff were wearing the mask. If you want to wear the mask, you can. But if you don't want to, it was perfectly fine. Everybody has been tested. The trip was absolutely magnificent. It felt normal for a change. It was a good break that we all needed.
Well, Nevein, for our transportation audience, the thought of spending 5 to 7 days in a beach destination in flip-flops and shorts sounds pretty good, especially with a lot of the U.S. Having some record cold temperatures. Do you have a lot of clients planning trips already in 2021?
Believe it or not, everybody is ready for trips. Now, with the Europe being very restricted for travel and no cruises going on at this moment, everybody is all up for all-inclusive and beach days and flip-flops and mask-free. Every island, as I mentioned, is different. Example, St. Lucia is a week before you travel. You do the COVID test. Barbados is 72 hours. Aruba, 72 hours. Every island is different. Make sure you know where you're going and what the rules are. best thing to do is call an experienced travel agent that's been through it and knows what to do, can advise you. And all you have to do is just pick a destination, pay for it, and she's got all the work taken care of. And you just go there and grab a cocktail and chill out.
Grab a cocktail and chill out. I know a lot of people are probably painting that picture in their head right now, especially if they're driving down the interstate, delivering some freight. Hey, well, there's still a lot of uncertainty about travel. Let's break it down a little further. I think you've already answered the question about traveling outside the United States. Can you talk about other destinations around the world, if there's any restrictions on travel outside the U.S.?
Well, right now we're not recommending anything in Europe. For example, UK is on a lockdown. Different countries are in and out. So I don't recommend at this point, until all the vaccine has been distributed and people feel like they're safer and the borders are open. My recommendation right now, the easiest thing that is also manageable financially, less travel with the mask on for an international flight, is do the Caribbean. It's very simple, relaxing. They've got a handle on it. I have to tell you that. We were in Sandals in Jamaica, and they've gone over and beyond with cleanliness, with masks for the staff, for individual. Even the buffet was individually personalized. So everything was very, very clean. We felt very safe. There's nothing right now that tastes better than feeling and appreciating a vacation in sunshine, flip-flops, and being relaxed without the stress of the word COVID. That's all you hear in the news.
Well, hey, some of the doctors say vitamin D is one of the best ways to help prevent COVID. So, get out in the sunshine, get a little vitamin D. That's another fringe benefit about a travel destination to the Caribbean.
We're all about natural, right? So natural sunshine will give you all the vitamins you need. And mentally, though, you have to understand that we are all drained and we all need a mental break where we can just let go and relax.
That's a great point.
I think we're all needing that. Yeah.
Well, hey, can you talk about, I know you've got some experience with St. Lucia, Barbados, and Aruba as well. I've never been to any of those destinations. I've been to some places in Mexico, but you've got me kind of excited about planning a trip to the Caribbean as well.
Absolutely. So St. Lucia is very, very pretty. They have the Pitons, which are volcanic mountains. Very interesting excursions there. Beautiful beaches. For St. Lucia, you have to have the COVID test a week in advance. Submit the application, and like I said, they email you something like approval health piece of paper. You bring it with you, and once you check in, it's all awesome. You have beautiful scenery. You can hike the Pitons. You can snorkel there. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. Barbados has been the toughest island as far as COVID restrictions. They're given 72 hours, and you also get tested again 24 hours after arrival. That's been a little bit of a challenge, and they quarantine you basically off the beach till you get the test back. So that's been a little bit stricter than any other island. Aruba, believe it or not, I'm going next week, so I'm so excited about it. It's 72 hours before the trip, and then you're free and clear. You're good to go there.
Well, Nevein, if there was a family of, say, 4 or 5 planning a trip, and you being the professional that you are, what would you suggest for, say, a fantastic 6-day family vacation in the Caribbean?
At this point, honestly, hands down, I would say Jamaica. The resorts there are very kid-friendly. It's all-inclusive where you don't have to worry about, what my bill is. Once you pay in advance, you're pretty much done unless you do excursions. Certain resorts have a lot of sports included as well, like kayaking and paddleboard or diving or snorkeling, flights for the kids. So there's a lot going on. And like I said, they are the less restricted for initial visits, especially with everything that's going on. Price-wise is very good. Just honestly, if I would take my family right now and we're going, I would take them to Jamaica.
What is the average temperature, say, in the Caribbean, say, January through April? Typically the cooler climates here in the U.S. What is the average temps down there in the Caribbean?
It's a miserable 80 degrees sunshine.
Miserable. Is it like 80 year-round? Is that kind of the common
Pretty much.
temp?
You get some rainy season, but the rain there kind of like a quick shower. It drops it and then it stops, and then you've got the sun peeking and the rainbow, and it's all magical again. So, and actually the high season in the Caribbean is winter, because the weather is absolutely perfect and everybody's flocking from cold weather to there. Right now, believe it or not, a lot is getting sold out. So if you're interested in a vacation, especially if it's late in the year of 2021, I would highly recommend call your travel agent, make a booking, put initial deposit. You can even make installments till your final payment. And that way it's something to look forward to. Payments are not going to be a lump sum, and makes you happy that you're going to be having a good vacation, stress-free, sooner than later.
And one thing we'll do, like we always do on the road home, is we'll put some information in the show notes. And one nice thing that you're offering TSA members, Nevein, is you don't charge any service fees. So there's no additional costs to leverage your experience and talent to book one of these vacations. I know you're not here to promote your services, but I'll give you a shout out. I know you do a great job. And if you want more information on how to book a trip to the Caribbean and leverage Nevein's expertise, you can find her information in the show notes right here.
Hey, thank you, John. I appreciate it. No, I don't charge any service fee. The resorts or the cruises, they pay me directly. I don't like to double dip. So my service is purely for customer service. It's a win-win for your guests and for me. I have the experience. Cost-wise, it's the same, and it makes them stress-free and not worry about anything, and just look forward to that wonderful sunshine.
And speaking of cruises, let's talk a little bit about, have the cruise lines opened back up yet? Are they still in a wait-and-see mode? Talk to our audience a little bit about the cruise lines.
So the cruise lines have been sending a lot of emails to me as a travel agent. They've been actually canceling 60 days at a time. Their rules are going to have to be completely on the CDC approval before they cruise. There's a lot of talk of when and how. Officially right now, there are cruises, but nothing new to open, to book. I don't recommend booking at this point till we see a clear guideline of actual sale of any cruise line. I know that out of Norfolk, Virginia, we had to cancel for Carnival, which is the only cruise line that leaves out of our port, 2 May sailings and 1 September, believe it or not, of 2021. I've got a group on October, and that's locked till further information. So my guess, until we get clear guidance from the CDC about cruising, that's a lot of people in one vessel, and they had a lot of issue when the COVID started. So they're going to be the most tricked to come back to business.
Nevein, you mentioned about testing for COVID prior to departing on your destination, dream travel. But what about when you get back? Are there any requirements that the U.S. government has when you come back from one of these destinations that you have to quarantine at home?
No, officially, there is no quarantine when you get home. However, the quarantine can be through your business. So make sure you check with your business if they would require you to quarantine for 14 days after you get back. But officially, when you get back, you don't. However, my personal safety for my family as well. When I came back from Jamaica, I had a scheduled test to just make sure I'm safe and clear, and I had a test as soon as I got back, just to make sure that part of my trip is not affecting my family. And I was negative, so it was all good. That's a decision everybody has to make, but as an official status, you don't have to quarantine. It's recommended, but it's not required unless it's required by your business. And
you've educated me well as we prepare for these segments about travel insurance, trip insurance. Talk to us a little bit about the importance of that, especially in these uncertain times we have, and does the insurance cover COVID as well?
Absolutely. Now, I actually, funny you said that, I have clients that were scheduled to go to St. Lucia. It's a week before their travel. They get tested, and unfortunately, I got the message that we're going to have to cancel. We've been tested positive. That is considered a medical situation. So they're sick. So the insurance usually covers sick or death in family, or sick to a partner or immediate family. So that is covered. If you have insurance and it's not a covered reason, there are certain policies that's called cancel for any reason. Some have a little restriction for future bookings. Some it's completely canceled for any reason. So make sure you talk to your travel agent, see what kind of policy you would like, what makes you feel comfortable, because at the end of the day, especially with that COVID that hit us all out of nowhere, it's always to have that peace of mind.
And Nevein, for the single people out there, or maybe it's just ladies that want to plan a girls' trip, or guys that want to plan a guys' trip, and maybe go play a little bit of golf down in the Caribbean. If there's 4 or 5 friends that just want to go together, maybe 8 or 10, they don't have families yet, what would you recommend for a travel destination for them?
So I actually got a request for a guys' trip skiing. And some ski areas with lodges, you know how they take like 10 people, or, like big
like in a cabin.
Big lodge.
Yeah, big cabin.
Right.
Yeah.
So they have restrictions. If you're a family, it's okay. If you're not a family, they have to group them for less than 10, like maybe every 5 in one cabin. There are travel restrictions for that. Now, if you're going to the Caribbean, it's usually 2 or 3 per room, sometimes 4 per room. That's not an issue. And like I said, because you're all tested before you travel. So you can do that. That's not a big deal. We can do girls' trip. We can do guys' trip. Certain resorts, it's just couples. So it just depends on which resorts there is. Oh, by the way, not all the resorts on all the islands are what they call COVID certified or COVID friendly. The governments for each island have a list of resorts that are acceptable for you, what they call quarantine, even though you're not quarantining after you arrive the island. So, like I said, it's always good to check with your travel agent and see if your resort that you're picking is COVID acceptable. That way you don't have to worry about being put in a government facility when you get there, and that would be a shocking surprise that's unexpected.
Nevein Jeff, owner of the Concierge Travel Company, always a wealth of knowledge. Hey, thanks so much for joining me today, and wishing you a happy and prosperous 2021.
Oh, I am so excited to throw 2020 out the window and welcome 2021.